Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Weil. This is the Jupyter Frontends and Accessibility meeting for Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. Thank you all for joining us and watching. We've got about 11 people on the call right now. Thank you for joining. I dropped a link to the agenda into the chat. I can do that one more time for any recent joiners. This is the first Wednesday meeting of the month. So particular focus on accessibility for the first meeting every month. Um, and so if you have any accessibility related topics, please drop those into the agenda. Um, and let's see. I also noticed a few new faces. If anyone is new to the meeting, welcome. Please sign in using the HackMD link that I've dropped into the chat one more time. Would anyone like to introduce themselves? You know, your name, your affiliation, your interest in Jupyter?
I'll introduce myself. My name's Austin Stam, and I'm from Stanford University. I'm from the Office of Digital Accessibility. I'm the Digital Accessibility Instructional Specialist, and so I'm looking to learn more about. I'm very new to using Jupyter Notebooks. I'm trying to kind of provide resources for faculty who are using Jupyter Notebooks to ensure that their content is accessible. So I'm just looking to learn more about that and what strategies I can share with them.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Anyone else like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Silas. I'm a software and infrastructure engineer with the Data Science Undergraduate Studies program at UC Berkeley. And I'm sure you know, but all of our undergraduate data science classes use a Jupyter Hub, Data Hub, to do all of their homeworks and their labs and their projects and all of their work.
Excellent. Welcome, Silas. Any other new folks want to introduce yourselves? Oh, I see someone just go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Balaji Alvar. I also work for the Berkeley Jupyter Hub, and I have attended this meeting before, but haven't met most of the folks here, so I thought of introducing myself. And I also work on a JupyterLab extension that checks for accessibility issues. So yeah.
This was somewhat planned, Jason. We recently had a meeting on campus where I was chatting with Balaji and Silas, and I figured it would be a good idea for us to just come together and reconnect with the team during one of the weeks that was dedicated to accessibility. Our infrastructure on campus keeps on growing, and these issues are ever increasingly important. And with Silas now being part of the team, I thought it would be a good idea just for us to come meet the team and kind of hear where things are. Austin, it's great to meet you since you're kind of in the neighborhood, because it would be easy to connect locally. And maybe one day you can kind of swing up here by Berkeley and kind of meet the team, meet Balaji and Silas and some of the faculty who we've been doing this for 10 years here, and we have a pretty large operation. And I do come to Stanford somewhat regularly as well. Have lots of colleagues there, so it would be good to connect locally.
All right, cool. It's good to know that Berkeley and Stanford are on speaking terms. When I'm in the Bay Area, which isn't often, I have to like avoid mentioning one university if I'm near the other. You know, I grew up in the Northeast. I understand how it is with rivalries.
Berkeley and Stanford specifically, my department statistics has a joint Berkeley-Stanford colloquium where every 6 months we swap locations, we give talks across, and there's a soccer game between faculty and students. So at least I know my department and Berkeley stats are highly collaborative.
Nice. As long as it's not American football related, I think it can be congenial between the two of them. For our European friends, you can Google that. But anyway, okay, well, I want to put a priority on accessibility stuff, especially because we have some accessibility specialists who are interested. So I put a couple topics down, but if it's all right with you, Gabriel, you have an agenda item about Jupyter accessibility related to the Software Steering Council. Did you want to talk about that?
Yes. So the Software Steering Council, for those who are not aware, is a council that's made up of various sub-projects within the Jupyter ecosystem. One of those is Jupyter Accessibility, and I am the current representative of Jupyter Accessibility. I started back in October. That position for representative to the SSC has a 1-year term. So my term is ending this month. So we need to run a nomination election process. And I'm not exactly sure where to start or how to do it. So I don't know if anyone has like a link to like a step-by-step guide. I've kind of been looking around. I spent basically 15 minutes before this meeting looking, so I haven't like looked exhaustively, but I thought I would just ask the room in case anybody knows. Oh yeah, do this.
So I don't think we've established anything super formal. I will look for a minute. I remember where we wrote some guidelines on this. So I guess it's a timely thing that this is something that is more in my wheelhouse than JupyterLab technical issues, because it really is about governance. But the idea was that the original idea of the SSC reps was that they would be really representatives of the project, and it's kind of just a voice for the project, and a person who plays a bridging role in terms of communication and coordination. And so teams should be able to do that fairly informally, as simple as opening an issue on the GitHub Compass for the team could be sufficient. It's perfectly okay. I'm absolutely nearly certain that we have no term limits on this particular position. We have term limits for the executive council for the project for Jupyter, but not for SSC reps. So if you are okay continuing and nobody else is interested, it's okay to remain for another term. At the same time, obviously, it's good to rotate roles for a variety of reasons. That's kind of a healthy project practice to rotate those kinds of roles. But I think I'm pretty sure that several projects do it simply by opening an issue on their Team Compass, kind of socializing this idea through their channels, and coming to, it's kind of an agreement between the maintainers. If there's a formal election and 2 people are genuinely interested, a simple vote can be held. But I think several projects do that on a more informal level by kind of coming to agreement. In some cases, projects are small enough that it can literally be just a conversation. Who wants to do this year? And somebody says, I'll do it. So I don't think we have a rigid process for that part, precisely because of the range of scopes from two or three people deciding in conversation to something more explicit. But I would say for a project as large as this one, perhaps at least opening an issue on the Team Compass would be my suggestion. I'll double check to see if I can find anything more specific than that right now.
Yeah, for the software steering council stuff, I've been on a couple of teams where we had to pick an SSC representative, and like in a lot of volunteer board type positions, it's more like, does anyone want to do this? That I think very few of them had like contested elections. It's more like, is anyone interested in doing this? I was looking at that Team Compass, and it says there's a 1-year term, but the term limit kind of threw me, because I don't think that there's a limit for like the number of consecutive
exactly which we have for the executive council.
The executive council is limited because you want to have but you know, people could have multiple successive terms. It's just you have to pick every year.
Yes, I mistyped. It's not a term limit.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as saying, hey, we're up for renewal. Should I continue? That was by design, because we wanted people to have a chance to step down. We wanted to encourage rotation and kind of growth and leadership across the projects, but we did not want to impose something as rigid as term limits, which especially on small projects would literally, like, you could run out of people,
yes.
Right? You could literally run out of people. So, and I want to emphasize that it's not a role of power, but it is an important role in the project, because issues that pertain to interoperability, changes in a protocol or a format or a piece of architecture that impact other projects, we really need the SSC to be a place where the project kind of coordinates as a whole its activities, both technically and socially. So I do hope that it's a role that people are interested in playing. And speaking with my kind of EC hat on, we need an active and kind of thriving SSC. So thank you, and in that sense, thank you, Gabriel, for having done it so far. We appreciate that.
Let's see. I also want to point out that like there's little formality around this. It's more like it's usually like a Team Compass issue or email, or if you have, I mean, accessibility used to have dedicated meeting times until we folded it into this meeting, with the promise that once a month accessibility takes first priority in the meeting. So this is the correct forum to raise that subject. Yeah, good. Mike raises in the chat, and I'll repeat for the sake of the recording, that Google Forms has been used for voting in the past. It's rarely secret ballot, especially in a small organization. It's typically more of a consensus thing, or if you only have one person, it's more of like a sort of acclamation process. Okay, so Gabriel, are you kind of more satisfied with the way forward now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Are there any other accessibility topics? I see Austin has listed a few questions. Would you like to come off mute and talk about those?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I was just trying to kind of maybe see like, as we make a lot of different tutorial videos for faculty on how to do different on different topics. So like, I was curious, like if you're using like Jupyter notebooks, like what kind of tips would you have for someone who's a faculty member using it who wants to ensure their content is like accessible? Are there any like specific strategies there, or if they're exporting out of Jupyter notebooks to get it to be like an HTML file rather than like a PDF or something like that that's more inaccessible?
Yeah, it's a good question. Do folks have thoughts about this? I know we've had quite a few issues come up about like accessible HTML doing things like providing ARIA roles, and like WCAG compliance. I know we have like a contrast theme, higher contrast theme for people with visual ailments. But are there other like best practices that people can share here?
Balaji and Silas, not to put you folks on the spot, but do we have any like guidelines at Berkeley on in the DSUS documentation for faculty that maybe has like some tips on this? Has anyone ever written that? Because that could be a useful thing to collect and have, or have there been at the summer educational workshop? Do you recall there being any presentation that might be recorded on this topic that could serve as a starting point? Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, there is, Fernando, but this right now, I would say this is not comprehensive enough. But there is a
All right.
slide deck which is within Berkeley that has been shared, which has more detailed information, I would say. And once again, this is a work in progress. I wouldn't say it's comprehensive. And I'm sort of doing the work right now in collaboration with Eric Van Dusen.
Thank you for sharing. I'd be happy to help if I don't know how how it works exactly. This is my first meeting, but I just want to know I'm happy to help in any way too. Is that's like the area that I'm really focused on, is how we can support faculty to ensure that they're using the application in an accessible way.
Awesome.
So on the subject of, sorry, I might have missed something here, but we're talking about like, would something like this be applicable? I'm gonna paste this link in the chat. It's a bunch of notebook specific recommendations that are kind of like a bit inspired by like the web content accessibility guidelines, but then kind of narrowed for notebooks specifically and for notebook authors.
I get a 404 error when I try and access it. I don't know if anyone else does.
I wonder if that's because it's still, it might be because it's written, it's okay, it's a private repo within OnSite. Huh. I'll need to look into that. I think there is think this document lives also in another place. Let me look for it for a second and see if I can hunt it down. But well, is that something that sounds on topic here?
Is it kind of like a template, like example notebook of how
Not
to
an
make?
example notebook.
Okay.
It's a document of like guidelines.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for.
The other question that I have, and I don't know the state of that, so I'm just going to flag it as a question, but I know that the mist renderer is supposedly has some, I know that the mist development team, Rowan Cockett and colleagues have made specifically improvements in the HTML renderer that mist user, that is built for mist, so that it produces more accessible HTML, that it automatically tags and creates some of the roles and whatnot. I'm not an expert in this, but that's my understanding. My question is, has anyone tested whether a notebook that is rendered with the default, just the same notebook, but opened without the JupyterLab Mist extension and with the JupyterLab Mist extension, whether there's any measurable improvement in the resulting accessibility experience of the rendered notebook? Because that would be an argument for potentially kind of another argument in favor of the Mist machinery, or at least in continuing to make improvements in that direction. But I don't know whether anyone has done that comparative test, and anyone who actually knows how to do that, because I don't know how to do that test. I think
Mike
Nick
shares
has
in
his hand
chat, there
up.
was no accessibility testing for a long time on Jupyter. Nick also has his hand up. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, sure. You know, and I've laid this out in a bunch of different places. So the first thing to do in that case is, are we even generating valid HTML? Because all of the WCAG stuff is built on top of the HTML living document standard, IETF, whatever that thing is. So before even starting to jump straight to are we generating accessible content, it's are we generating valid content? And to my knowledge, Sphinx doesn't really do that. MB Converts certainly doesn't, and JupyterLab doesn't as an authored application, because then you're ratcheting it up a whole nother level. It's not static DOM that you can just toss out there. The canonical one for doing that is written in Java. It's called the VNU validator. So it's the one that runs validator.w3c.org. And so as a concrete step, you'd need a way to, get your DOM out and figure out if it's even valid. And there's a lot of things that I happen to know that we do that are not. There's things that you can't nest inside of other things. Because the screen readers, that's a terrible job. It's an awful job. And the fact that there isn't a industry standard supported by large companies, yada yada, screen reader on Linux, makes it very hard to have a lowest common denominator that you can test against. So you pretty much need full control of an operating system in order to use a real screen reader, and then you got to control it from the operating system level, which is not something browsers are particularly good at, or browser automation frameworks. So you really got to get outside the box. Once you get to that point, then you can start looking for further validation errors on top of that. A standard approach that folks have used is to use a browser-based plugin that relies on the user actually installing the plugin on their application, or in their personal browser. Or getting that plugin into the testing browser and then testing with that. And then where do you get your rule sets? The most common ones that folks use out there are in the Slips my mind at the moment. There was Pally for a while. We had that because that was relatively closed form, and then they went crazy. And now it's some other framework that we're not using. So, you know, it's a multi-layered problem to get to. If you want data and you don't do any of the upfront stuff, you're going to get 10,000 errors on a page as complex as the JupyterLab page. So the PR that was linked there by Mike is starting to look at that for static HTML. That is a smaller lift. Getting to NB convert and NB viewer, actually rendering accessible content as a default, right? If you have to opt into accessible content, then it's not going to be. So if you have to go and pick it instead of slides or whatever, I want the accessible content. And so when we do stuff like adding a table of contents, there's a PR open for that right now, and that's just, you know, a bunch of divs or something. There's no semantic structure to helping you understand how that actually would work on NB convert. It's mirroring what's in JupyterLab so that we can reuse the CSS, but it's not actually going to push that much. Maybe speaking to a child. Andre, did you have a point? Yeah. So yeah, the situation will not improve as we continue to add features unless there are automated checks in place that keep us at least to the baseline that we have. And there has been no stomach thus far to adding Java to the build chain, to adding another testing framework on top of another testing framework on top of another testing framework to actually get that data to start making those assertions. And then specifically in the screen reader case, that's very hard. You know, if you think about it from the Galata standpoint, if you've got a screenshot, do you have a transcript shot of this is what happens if you read the notebook right now that's being edited? Like ignore JupyterLab itself for a sec and concentrate just on the Jupyter single screen notebook experience. That's a much easier thing to try and do. So, you know, how would you establish what 60% of automated stuff we can to not regress on that? And then how would you improve upon that? But we don't have that. And we continue to add features that don't have an accessibility perspective on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Thank you for your insights. That was really helpful.
Folks are at the agenda for folks who are joining for the first time gets shared as part of the Team Compass issue on GitHub. And this recording is usually uploaded to the YouTube channel for IPython and Jupyter. So you'll be able to watch it later on. All right, we are about halfway through our time slot, and there is another meeting on this channel at 10 o'clock Pacific. Are there any other accessibility topics, questions, areas for discussion? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So I'm going to proceed to the agenda items that are not specific to accessibility. I'm the next one up on this. There was a pull request that came in on JupyterLab that was asking if I could tag it with Hacktoberfest, which I did. I am not too familiar with what Hacktoberfest is. I'm presuming that it's October related, and yesterday was the 1st of October. And the person who opened that asked, are we doing Hacktoberfest this year? And I don't know, is the answer to that. Does anyone here know whether Jupyter is participating in Hacktoberfest this year? I think we did last year. Not hearing anything yay or nay. Mike says a few years ago there was an overflow of poor quality PRs, which we don't really want. There's a giveaway. You get merch if you do stuff with Hacktoberfest. Is that it? The risk, yeah. I kind of saw that when on the security side, we had that bug bounty program, which Jupyter did not kick in money for. It was funded by the European Commission. And we got some good bugs that came in, but we also got a fair amount of people who had really no knowledge of Jupyter specifically, but they participate in lots and lots of bug bounties. They just run the same security scanners on everything and just, scoop up as much money as possible, which, that is the purpose, is to identify things, but it's also not like driving contributions from within. You get like kind of a flood of engagement and then nothing when the month ends. So I don't think there's anything, Mike says if a good quality PR comes, we can always accept and add the tag. I agree. Like, as a person with privilege to add labels, if someone says, hey, can you put Hacktoberfest on this? Like, sure, that's fine. I'm not pursuing that myself, but if someone else wants credit, they can do that. Apparently, there's also, I'm just very quickly scrolling through the Hacktoberfest page, like you can tag, and apparently this is what people do in Preptember, the precursor to Hacktoberfest, is people tag their projects with Hacktoberfest so that people can like prepare to start hacking on it in the month of October, which I'm presuming we didn't do that during Preptember. We were preparing our own thing. Okay, well, it sounds like we're not actively engaging with Hacktoberfest, but if people want to participate, we won't complain. Speaking of preparation, though, 4.3.0, JupyterLab 4.3.0 is currently in beta. I wanted to take a quick look through the milestones 4.3.0. It looks like we have 15 items that are open in the 4.3.0 milestone. And of those, we have 2 that are tagged for as a release blocker. So there's YDoc stable, which I know Mike has talked about doing like at the moment of release. So it's technically a release blocker, but like it's not something that we're actively working on. I did also want to talk about this file browser columns not consistently positioned, which I opened back in August. I opened one pull request to use CSS grid, and then Mike opened a different pull request to use inline grid. And Mike and I have been kind of poking and prodding and testing our respective PRs. At this point, I'm more inclined to accept Mike's because it both works as expected and allows extension writers to extend the file browser. That's not a case that I had been testing as actively. So I'm curious what other folks think, or if Mike, you just want to go ahead and merge your PR in for inline grid. I also encourage folks to take a look at the respective PRs. Yeah, and my PR reduces the public API by removing some newly added arguments to the methods with sizing. I don't know if I don't know if you're saying that as a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know what people are. Mike is saying good thing. So I've been working on the file browser lately, but like the current state of the file browser in tip of main is, to put it nicely, not great. We need to improve the appearance of it because the file names are really not easy to read at this point. So what do people think about, like merging one or the other in, or at least taking a look at these? This is like the one remaining thing before we can get to a release candidate.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, like whether there was another thing to consider, or should we be able to get to RC after one of the 2 PRs is merged?
I think once we get this done, we can move to an RC and then like, keep bumping Jupyter YDoc and then like release with the new Jupyter YDoc. Like that wouldn't block an RC. That's what I'm hearing from Mike. Mike says I can work on benchmarking and finishing up the 2 PRs over the weekend. Mike mentioned in the agenda that he's unable to unmute, so I'm just reading out what he says in the chat for the record. So Mike says finishing up the 2 PRs over the weekend. So I'm okay to kind of leave that for now. I'd say if you have the availability, please test out the beta. The beta is available through the normal channels, or you can build from source. Most people who install JupyterLab don't even know that there is a beta option, which I think is generally good, right? If you're running this in a production environment or at like an educational institution, you don't want to be running beta software. But we also want to try to get people to test this, drink our own champagne, as an old VP of mine like to say. But you know, if you have the availability, please try it out and please open new issues. We do weekly issue triage every Tuesday morning Pacific time, including identifying potential release blockers. Okay, well, I'm not hearing any other questions, comments about that. So I do want to move on to Jeremy. He has a few items on the agenda.
Yeah, so it's mostly about an extension. So last week there was a PyData Paris took some time to try to update a quick open extension that a former Jupyter steering council member wrote, Peter apparently, and now it works in JupyterLab 4. So it's pretty useful because you can open a file very quickly, a little bit like in other editors, like in VS Code. I think we also talked about this at some point a few weeks ago. And there's an issue in JupyterLab about this quick open feature. Well, the question would be, does this belong to core lab or not? I mean, I think it's fine to have it as an extension for now, but since it's quite useful to have, maybe that's something we should consider in a future release. On the technical side, there are some maybe some things to consider, especially the way files are indexed. Currently, it's using a server extension to walk the tree and then provide a list of files to the front end. It works, but maybe there is a better way to do it, or more efficient way. So yeah, that's it. So feel free to try it. It's just a regular extension, and then we can continue the discussion in the issue.
Does it belong to, I mean, this is something that's come up a lot of times before. I feel like it's something that people have come to expect. I'm curious what other people have to say about this, though. And Mike found another pull request, 15483, about modal navigation. This does look similar to that, particularly for the VS Code, adding that modal. And this was merged in when? I don't remember this. 4.2. Okay. This was merged in back in March. Okay, so it's been released for some time.
Yeah. So the current implementation of that quick open extension is using the command palette widget.
Which widget?
The one for the command palette.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same. It feels natural, but I think it would also be fine to consider the model for reopening the files. if we can make it extensible so that we can provide a list of files that should be listed there, and we can open them quickly, then it will also be fine if it's easier, in terms of UX and to make it consistent.
Okay, I'm not hearing any additional commentary. Let's see, I'm taking a look through the agenda because we kind of jumped around a little bit on this accessibility day. Mike, I jumped over your agenda item. I'm sorry about that. Mike mentions he's still looking for a review on fixing overriding shortcuts, which is pull request 16721. Which, have I looked at that yet? I don't think I have. I might be able to take a look at that today or soon. Yeah, I have been trying to take occasional cruises through the pull request queue. We don't triage pull requests necessarily, but this is something that, especially for new contributors, we want to ensure that they're getting the attention that they deserve, to encourage people to move forward. So it looks like there are currently 83 open pull requests. And of them, it looks like about 10 are in the last month. Some of them are significantly older. Although the per cell run button is something that I set aside some time ago, and especially with the file browser grid stuff kind of on hold until the weekend, I was planning to pick that one up next and promote it to ready for review. So I also approve of the use of meetings like this to solicit attention for pull requests that are in need of attention. Okay, are there any other topics that people would like to discuss on the record? Okay, well, hearing none, I think I'm going to stop the recording, everyone. Brace yourselves.